On my wedding day, the words that cut deepest didn't come from strangers. They came from my own family. I can still hear the laughter, sharp and cruel. "She's just a soldier," they sneered, as if all my years of sacrifice, sweat and service meant nothing. But what they didn't know was that only moments later the doors would swing open, the army band would march in, and a medal, the highest honor, would be placed on my chest. And in that instant the same mouths that mocked me fell completely silent. Before I tell you how everything unfolded, make sure to subscribe to Revenge with John for more powerful stories like this one. And tell me in the comments, have you ever been underestimated by the people who should have supported you most? My name is Beatrice. If you ask my family, I was never the favorite child. I was the disappointment, the odd one out. From the moment I could walk, I was climbing, running, testing my limits. But in my mother's eyes, girls weren't supposed to be like that. Girls were supposed to be delicate, graceful, soft. My father agreed. They poured all their pride and expectations into my older brother, Michael. He studied business, wore suits, and gave speeches about the family legacy. He was the golden child. Me, I was the troublemaker. The one who didn't sit still. The one who refused to fit into the box they built for me. When I told them I wanted to join the military, my mother almost fainted. "A soldier? For a girl like you? You'll ruin your future. Who would want to marry a woman who spends her life in mud and boots?" My father only shook his head. To him it was just another sign that I was reckless, ungrateful, a disappointment. But the truth is, I didn't care about their approval anymore. I wanted to prove, to myself more than anyone, that I was capable of more than they ever imagined. The years that followed were anything but easy. Training was brutal. The heat, the exhaustion, the endless drills that pushed every muscle and bone past its breaking point. But I endured. I endured because every scream in my head, every drop of sweat that burned my eyes, carried the same thought: I will not let them be right about me. While Michael was being celebrated at family dinners for landing internships at shiny offices, I was out in the field. Mud on my face, bruises on my body, yet stronger than I'd ever been. But when I came home on leave, do you know what I got? Not pride. Not respect. Just smirks. "So you can carry a rifle. But can you carry a family?" Even as I rose through the ranks, even as my commanders recognized my discipline and strength, my family's words remained the same: "She's just a soldier." And so, when my wedding day arrived, it should have been the moment they finally looked at me with pride. The day they saw me as more than their invisible daughter, more than a failure in their eyes. But instead, as the guests whispered and my relatives laughed, I realized they would never change. Still, what they didn't know was that fate and the military had its own surprise planned for me that day. A surprise that would make every single one of them choke on their laughter. Because the moment those doors opened, everything they thought they knew about me was shattered. The night before my wedding, while most brides might be stressing over flowers, dresses, or seating charts, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. My family's words echoed louder than any church bell could. "She's just a soldier." It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life, yet I knew I would walk down that aisle already judged, already dismissed. And then my phone buzzed. At first I thought it was a message from my fiancé Marcus, but the sender wasn't him. It was from the Office of Military Honors. The words on the screen froze me in place. "Beatrice Hall, by decision of the commanding board, your Medal of Distinguished Service will be formally awarded at your wedding ceremony, as per request and arrangement. Confidential until presented." My hands trembled as I held the phone. The Medal of Distinguished Service. One of the highest honors any soldier could ever dream of. And they were planning to present it to me, at my wedding. I pressed the phone to my chest and closed my eyes. For years I had endured their ridicule in silence. Tomorrow the silence would break, not with my words but with the sound of boots, drums, and a medal gleaming under the lights. The morning came, and with it the weight of tradition. My mother barged into the bridal suite, her face already tight with disapproval. She eyed my uniform jacket neatly folded on the chair. "You're not seriously thinking of wearing anything military today, are you? This is a wedding, Beatrice, not a parade ground. Don't embarrass us." I bit my tongue. How could I tell her that the very thing she mocked me for was about to become the reason strangers would rise to their feet in awe? As the guests began to arrive, the whispers spread like wildfire. I could hear them even from behind the closed doors. "She's marrying Marcus, isn't she? Poor man, tying himself to a soldier. Do you think she'll even know how to raise children? She'll probably treat them like recruits. She should have stayed home like a proper woman. What a waste. Each word cut, but none destroyed me. Because in the pocket of my dress, folded neatly, was the official letter. Proof that everything they said was about to be crushed under the weight of truth. My brother Michael made his grand entrance as if it were his day, not mine. He adjusted his tie, shaking hands, making small speeches to relatives. When he saw me, he smirked. Well, at least you finally did something traditional. I was starting to think you'd get married in combat boots. I didn't respond. My silence only made him laugh harder. He had no idea that soon, in front of everyone he tried to impress, he would be the one standing in my shadow. And as I stood by the doors of the chapel, my heart racing, I whispered to myself, "Just a soldier, huh? Let's see what you say when the drums start." The music began, soft and delicate, the kind of melody brides dream of walking to. But as I stood there, veil in place, bouquet trembling in my hands, I could feel the weight of every whisper slicing through me. She's not elegant. She looks too stiff. Her shoulders, those are soldier's shoulders, not a bride's. Marcus deserves better. She's just a soldier. Every step I took down the aisle felt heavier than the last. My eyes swept across the pews. Family, relatives, neighbors, faces I had known my entire life, yet never truly belonged to. Their gazes weren't of pride. They were measuring me, mocking me, waiting for me to stumble. I wanted to shout, to tell them what was coming. But instead I held my head high because I knew something they didn't. Marcus smiled at me from the altar, his eyes soft, reassuring. He had always believed in me even when no one else did. And just as I reached his side, just as the whispers reached their cruelest crescendo, it happened. The chapel doors swung wide open. At first the guests turned, irritated at the interruption. But then a sound thundered through the room, boots striking in unison, drums rolling like thunder. The army band marched in, crisp uniforms gleaming, medals glinting in the light. Gasps filled the air. Conversations died mid-sentence. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My brother Michael froze, his smug grin collapsing into confusion. Leading the procession was my commanding officer. His voice rang out, steady, commanding, echoing against the walls of the church. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are here on behalf of the armed forces of this nation. Today, on this most special occasion, we bestow upon Lieutenant Beatrice Hall the Medal of Distinguished Service." The whispers that once cut me turned to silence so thick it was deafening. Every pair of eyes that once judged me now widened in shock. My commanding officer approached me holding the velvet box. He pinned the medal to my dress, right above my heart. The medal was cold, heavy, and yet it lifted every weight I had carried for years. "Your courage, discipline, and dedication have brought honor not only to the military but to this nation. Today we recognize you as one of our finest." Tears blurred my vision. For a moment I wasn't just a bride. I wasn't just a soldier. I was enough. More than enough. The guests rose to their feet, applause breaking like a wave. The same relatives who had whispered now clapped in awe. My mother's face was pale, my father's expression unreadable, and Michael, his jaw clenched, fists tight, as the spotlight he had always craved finally belonged to me. I looked out at them all, my heart steady. And I thought, just a soldier? Well, I am a soldier. And today that is everything. The applause still rang through the chapel, but my eyes weren't on the guests who now stood in admiration. They were fixed on the faces that mattered most, the ones who had doubted me all my life. My mother sat frozen, her lips parted, the words she had once repeated so often, "You're wasting your life," choking in her throat. Her eyes darted to the medal on my chest, then to the crowd rising to their feet. She had always cared about appearances more than truth. And now, the truth had shattered her carefully constructed image. My father's expression was harder to read. His jaw was tight, his eyes narrowed. He had built his pride around Michael, never me. But now, sitting there, he could no longer deny the reality. His daughter had achieved what his son never could. Michael, though, his reaction was the one I will never forget. His face turned crimson, his fists clenched at his sides. The brother who had smirked at my every achievement, who had mocked me with his friends at family dinners, who had always introduced me as the sister who plays soldier, now stood powerless in front of the truth. His eyes burned with fury, but behind that anger I saw it clearly, shame. He couldn't hide from it. Not here. Not with the army band still standing tall in their immaculate uniforms. Not with my commanding officer saluting me. Not with every single guest whispering his name in comparison to mine. When the ceremony continued, the whispers changed. They weren't mocking anymore. She's incredible. Her family must be so proud. What an honor to witness this. Each word was like a blade turned back on the people who had wounded me. And I didn't need to say a single thing. Marcus took my hand, smiling with pride so pure it made my chest ache. "You deserve this," he whispered. And in that moment, I knew that while my family had spent years trying to make me feel small, the man I chose to marry saw me for who I truly was. As the band played, I stood taller. Not just as a bride, not just as a soldier, but as someone who had finally won a battle without lifting a weapon. My victory wasn't in shouting or proving myself with words. It was in their silence, in their wide eyes, in the shame that clung to them like a shadow. Later, as the reception began, I caught my mother watching me from across the room. She wanted to say something, an apology perhaps, or maybe an excuse. But she didn't. She couldn't. The weight of years of doubt pressed too heavily on her. Michael avoided me altogether. For once he didn't have a joke, a smirk, or a cutting remark. He stayed in the corners, invisible in the same way he had tried to make me feel all my life. And my father? He raised a glass to Marcus but never to me. Some people, I realized, could never bring themselves to acknowledge the truth, even when it stared them in the face. But it didn't matter anymore. Because I no longer needed their approval. I had found something greater: respect, honor, and the strength to stand tall in the face of every whisper, every sneer, every doubt. They had called me just a soldier. But on my wedding day the world called me something else. A hero. The days after the wedding were nothing like what my family expected. They had come prepared to whisper, to gossip, to roll their eyes at me. But instead they left that chapel with my name on their lips. And not as an insult but as a headline. Articles spread across local papers and online. Lieutenant receives Medal of Distinguished Service, on her wedding day. Neighbors I had barely spoken to came by with flowers. Old classmates who had once mocked me sent messages of congratulations. For the first time in my life, people weren't looking past me. They were looking at me. But my family, they couldn't stand it. My mother stopped answering calls from her bridge club friends, afraid of hearing their questions. My father buried himself in work, pretending none of it had happened. Michael, oh Michael. He sulked, avoided me, and told anyone who would listen that the military just hands out medals these days. But even his voice trembled when he said it. Because deep down they all knew the truth. I had fought for years for their approval. I had bent myself into knots trying to make them see my worth. But standing there with my medal, my husband's hand in mine, and the applause of strangers louder than their doubts, I realized something I had never allowed myself to believe before. I didn't need them. Life with Marcus became a new chapter filled with peace I had never known in my parents' home. He reminded me every day that strength isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about knowing who you are and standing tall, even when others try to tear you down. The Army continued to recognize my work. My superiors spoke of future promotions. My comrades called me an inspiration. And for the first time in years I looked in the mirror and saw not the shadow of who my family wanted me to be, but the reflection of who I truly was. One evening, weeks after the wedding, Michael showed up at my door. His pride was cracked, his eyes restless. He tried to joke at first, to minimize what had happened. But then his words faltered. "You really showed them. You showed all of us." I didn't respond with anger. I didn't need to. I simply looked at him and said, "I didn't do it to show you. I did it to show me." And that was the truth. From that day on, I stopped carrying their doubts on my shoulders. Their shame belonged to them. Their silence was their punishment. As for me, I was no longer just a soldier. I was Beatrice Hall. A wife. A daughter. Sister. A soldier. A hero. And no one, not even my family, could take that away from me again. Years passed after my wedding, but the memory of that day never faded. Not because of the whispers that had tried to tear me down, but because of the silence that followed when the truth crashed into the room like thunder. I continued my service. I rose through the ranks, took on missions that tested every part of me, and led soldiers who looked to me not just as a superior but as a role model. Each step forward was proof that my path, my choice, had been the right one all along. Whenever my name appeared in newspapers or on broadcasts, my family never mentioned it. My mother stopped clipping articles about Michael because there was no way to hide the fact that mine were the stories people wanted to read. My father never congratulated me, not once. And Michael, he sank deeper into the shadows of his own bitterness, unable to accept that the sister he mocked had surpassed him in ways he never could. But here's the thing. Their silence no longer hurt me. It freed me. Because by then I had learned that the loudest revenge isn't in shouting back. It's in living so fully, so truthfully, that those who doubted you can't escape their own shame. On the anniversary of my wedding, Marcus surprised me. He had arranged for a gathering, not of family, not of people who had doubted me, but of comrades, friends, and the new family I had chosen for myself. As I walked into the hall, photos of my journey covered the walls. From my first day at the academy, to training in the mud, to standing at the altar with a medal shining on my chest. Marcus raised his glass and said, "To Beatrice, the woman they once called just a soldier. The woman who showed the world that being a soldier is more than enough. It's extraordinary." The room erupted in applause. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to look around for faces that weren't there. Because my story was never about proving myself to them. It was about proving to myself that I was always worthy, even when they refused to see it. So to anyone listening now, let me tell you this. When they laugh, when they doubt, when they whisper behind your back, don't waste your breath trying to silence them. Let your actions do it for you. Rise so high that their words turn to ash in their throats. Because one day, just like me, you'll walk into a room and the very people who mocked you will have no choice but to sit in silence. And that silence, that will be your victory.